Well, g'day folks, and welcome to another exciting live show. This is an absolute ripper. I'm joined by some great guests tonight. We're going to be talking about the Gemini boat race. We all know what that's about. The boat race, as it used to be called in the old days, Gemini is the new sponsor. Anyway, that aside, firstly, welcome John Perry, rowing guru, member of Hawthorn Rowing Club. John, thank you for joining me.
Absolute pleasure, Guy. Long-time listener, first-time contributor.
Oh, well, no, you contribute behind the scenes, John. You're giving me lots of tips and advice and ideas, so it's always much appreciated. It'd be good to drag your knowledge in. I'll tell you what, mate, you're going to be thrown under the bus in the next hour, I reckon, a few times. So I hope you've been doing your homework and your research because, as you know, I know absolutely nothing about Cambridge or Oxford, and the closest thing I ever went to university was a TAFE in Box Hill. So I don't think it quite constitutes those levels. Also, we're lucky to have Rob Manning from RowMann Repairs. G'day, Rob. Thanks for jumping on.
Thanks, Guy. Thanks for having me again. It was a great chat, 2 weeks ago?
Well, it was a great chat, Rob. The only problem there is when you sort of hung up, we were concerned because you were driving a boatload of trailers down the Geelong Freeway. A boatload of trailers? How about a trailer load of boats down the Geelong Freeway? And so we're a bit concerned of where your attention was lying, whether it was on the road or on the screen here. But that was a bit of fun.
I got there safely, so it was all good.
Excellent. Well, we're going to talk about the boat race, the famous boat race, the Gemini boat race. Did you boys know why it's called the Gemini boat race? You know it's called the Gemini? Do you know who Gemini is?
Is it a sponsor?
I know the naming sponsor.
Come on. I've said, John, let's do a bit of research. And the first hurdle... No. All right, that's all right. I don't expect you to know. Gemini is a cryptocurrency exchange. And it was founded by the Winklevoss brothers. And, of course, we know Winklevoss from Facebook and also, and I'm going to be 50% right here, Cambridge or Oxford. I have no idea. But they're both rowers in one of those.
Harvard.
Oh, well, I wasn't even close.
And they lost the Grand Challenge Cup to, I think, the German team.
Well, and this is why you're paid the big bucks, John, and this is why you're on here. So you've recovered from that hurdle and you're marching on, of course, because they're American, aren't they? But anyway, so they're Gemini and they sponsor it, and that's why it's called the Gemini. There's been other big previous names prior to that. Now, we're going to be joined very shortly by Alistair Taylor from Cambridge University Boat Club. So he'll be able to add a bit of quality content. In the meantime, let's have a bit of a chat about the event and how it all works and so forth. John, I think when we were talking about it initially, you suggested, are we just going to talk about the one race, meaning the men? And this is not at all being a sexist thing because the women are only been recently introduced, all of only 80 years ago. I think more than that, maybe. But there's also, which I didn't realise until recently, there is a total of 4 events. There is the women, there is the men, and there's the reserves. Which
well, indeed, and I think the fact that 7 of the 8 Cambridge women's crew rowed in the winning reserves race last year might give them a bit of favouritism. But I know we're not talking about the tips yet, but
no, yes, we won't talk about the tips. Well, that'll be interesting to see. I mean, the reserves are obviously no slouches either, are they? I suppose. Look, again, not knowing too much about it in the slightest, they're only there for a couple of years, aren't they? So they've got to work pretty hard to get up to that number one crew, I would have thought.
Oh, well, indeed. I mean, it's that they had the trial races during December and January. It's apparently 30 hours training a week. They train in the most appalling conditions because it's December, January, February in England, which, as we know, is not the nicest of climate. So, yes.
Are those months even nice during summer? Not those months, but you know what I mean. The summer months are, 12, 13 degrees. Balmy, I would imagine, in that, But,
so summer's beautiful in London because you get, it's light till about 10 o'clock at night. It's not much wind. But unfortunately, it's the opposite. In March, the end of March, it's not really nudging summer. So we can see some pretty terrible conditions on the Thames.
I'll be interested to ask Alistair about all that, because it is a brutal thing for. I mean, obviously this has been going around a long time. What, 170 years? I had all this info in front of me, but I had to reboot, as we know. I was having some technical issues. But whoever thought of it at the start was a bit of a brutal person, weren't they? To say, hey, let's do an event as you can train all through winter. But I suppose back then they wouldn't have done the workloads that they're doing now, so probably a bit easier. But I'm not going to compare time and place and all of that. Hey, Rob, what are your thoughts when we talk about the boat race, the Gemini boat race?
It's an interesting one. You look at the makeup of the senior crew and the reserve crews on both the women's and men's side, and it's actually a who's who of international rowing. It's amazing how many international athletes and national rowers there are who've gone on to study, great study, but we use that as a stepping stone either for their own national teams or keep that, they step away from national teams, but they keep their training up for when they actually go back to training. And especially last year's race, it's as much as a coxswain's race as it is, I suppose the 8 guys in the boat driving the boat. So there's areas where you get out in front and where you can sit in dead water and you can, I suppose, push your opposition out wide. It's a very, very tactical race. I just think it is so interesting to watch.
Yeah, look, obviously I've known about it forever and a day, but only just ahead of doing this show tonight is I've done a bit more research over the last week or so and watched a great deal of YouTube videos. Cambridge have put together a fantastic thing. I'm sure, I know you've seen it, John. I don't know if you've seen it, Robert, Turning the Tide, a few episodes of that. And it really has a lot going on. This is not just line up in a straight line for 2K. This is so much more complex and so much more exciting. It makes the other stuff look a bit, I don't know, do I dare say soft? But I won't dare say that. But, it's a whole different beast of a thing.
Yeah. I mean, you look at, I suppose, one of the two most iconic universities in the world, and this race, the banks of, the riverbanks are just lined all the way along, and Putney Bridge and everything like that. It's just the crowd that it draws is just phenomenal. And it was fun to watch. And one day, I might be there. But having had one of my athletes row for Cambridge, a few years ago, that was exciting too. So one of the guys I coached at school. So,
that would be a bit of a buzz when you've coached a kid and you see them going on to that level. In one of their episodes, one of the Turning the Tide series that they've been doing as a bit of a promo, they were saying, someone was commenting that even Olympians, young budding Olympians, are giving up that direction or journey to go down this road first to tick this box as obviously one of the big boxes to tick.
Yeah, it is, and the amount they train is at that elite level. So, coming out of a boat race like this, you probably find a lot of them will go home and, if there's, either defer from their studies or go home, and especially in an Olympic year or leading up to Olympic year, a lot of them will go home and they'll be at a level where they can compete at national trials, and a lot of the time they will make national teams because it's just such a challenging training schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, hey, we're going to go through time very quickly here. So I'm going to start throwing a bit of heat in John's direction and just see what his research has been up to and test him out to see if he's at the Alan Crute level of knowledge. No, that's all right. We're not expecting that at all, John. Don't worry. But why don't we start off with, let's say, the reserves and go through a bit of that. And I can see you now panicking a little bit, going, you never told me we were going to mention the reserves.
Well, can I tell you, firstly, in true political style, I'll just redirect your question. Can I tell you why I'm most excited about this weekend coming up?
Yep, please.
Well, in the main cruise, we've got 3 Australians across the 4 boats.
Oh, okay.
For the first time in quite some time, it's actually on a Saturday, which the English like to call the bank holiday Saturday because of Easter. The weather's looking like it should be okay.
Yeah.
So to Rob's point about how many people line the banks, I'm going to go with my first prediction and say there's going to be 300,000 people along the banks of the Thames watching this race.
All right, okay. I got to ask: is that actually a genuine figure, or are you just picking something out of the? Is it that big?
They normally get about 250,000 people watching it along the banks. So
Oh my God!
Because it's a Saturday rather than a Sunday.
Yeah.
And most of the course guides aren't really about the river; they're mainly about the pubs that line the river.
I've got a question for Alistair on that a bit later. Actually, it's very important. But yeah.
So that's another one of the reasons why I'm very excited about this weekend. Is it's a bank holiday Saturday, not a Sunday. Weather forecast is looking okay. 14 degrees, which is quite balmy for March. Another reason I'm quite excited is the last year's bowman of Cambridge is now the stroke. So that gives all us bowmen hope that, things can happen.
And there's a comment to the Hawthorn selection committee, isn't there, that bowmen should be moved to stroke. Was there another stat in that too? A previous bowman as well had.
Well, it's interesting that last year's winning crew, the stroke of that crew, was the bowman the year before in the losing crew. So the 2022 losing crew of Cambridge, the bowman then became Luca Ferrero. He became stroke in 2023, and they bow rigged the boat.
Right.
And then won, and he is now 7 seats because they've stroke rigged the boat and stuck last year's bow, who was obviously on stroke side, as the stroke, who's Matt Edge.
Right.
So can you tell I'm actually avoiding any question about the reserves crew?
I can tell you're avoiding any question about the reserves crew, and that's okay because we can fluff through that. I think the reserves is a simple one. I think that's Cambridge hands down. That 5 and 6 seat in that Cambridge crew, without doubt, are exceptional. They're pulling ergs that is, I think better than anyone in the first cruise. And yes, I made that all up. It sounded like I knew something for a moment, didn't it? Of course, that would not be true. I have no idea about the reserves cruise either, but that doesn't mean that it's not at all important. I think if you're in that reserve crew, you've done pretty damn well, haven't you? Crikey.
Oh, well, indeed. You're still rowing the course.
Yeah. And one thing I've noticed, they do a lot of training on that course too. I'll be interested to ask Alistair when he comes in on that as well, because I just see, again, I didn't realise how many sort of lead-up races that they have, little events. There was one just a few months back, or about 6 weeks ago, where Cambridge raced against the Dutch crew. Not necessarily the Dutch crew. There were a few youngies in that crew, but they certainly they sorted out the Dutch good and proper. Which is interesting to see for basically a college crew, but and the Dutch know how to row, so all very interesting stuff. All right, let's move on to something that you certainly will know a bit about, John, and that'll be the main cruise. What can you tell us about what we'd expect to see from Oxford? Because I believe they're going in as a little bit of the favourite this time around, even though there's a bunch of people back in from Cambridge. So I don't know how that works, but
well, Oxford's certainly going in as favourite, even though they've only got one, what they call blue, from last year. So their 4-man James Goran rode in last year's losing crew.
Yep.
And as you know, with the boat race, you either win it or you lose it.
Yep.
This is another interesting fact. Like, you look at the Cambridge captain's room where they have all the crews listed and the dates and the crews. It's either won or lost.
Yeah, I've noticed that doing a bit of searching. It's a pretty brutal. You win or you lose. It's a brutal thing.
Yeah. So Cambridge's only got one rower from last year in the losing crew, but they have a number of under-23 world champions in their crew.
Right.
They're slightly heavier. They're like 92 average weight versus Cambridge's 91. Their 6th seat is an Australian, Frederick Roper, who rode in the Geelong Grammar School first 8 in 2017 that came 3rd.
Oh, well, that's what Geelong Grammar breed, that sort of standard of rower, don't they, John?
Right, indeed. That's what I keep telling the Hawthorn selectors, but we'll move. there's a one Australian. There's a lot of British in that crew. It's not quite as international as some of the other crews. As I said, a heavier weight, and they are favourites. But I think Cambridge will win.
All right. Why do you think Cambridge will win? Because you're being controversial, or you've got a little bit of inside knowledge, or
Cambridge has got 5 returning rowers from the winning crew last year.
Yeah.
There's a lot of water coming down this river still, because it has flooded quite significantly over the last couple of months. So much so Oxford, I think, had 3 or 4 weeks off training where they couldn't actually row on that river. Even though it goes on the incoming tide, so you've got a current, you've got a lot of water coming the other way. And I think that'll just favour people that have got longer distances in their legs and that have had success over that distance. And that race last year was it wasn't an easy race. So even though Cambridge isn't favourite, with 5 winning oarsmen, I'm going to say Cambridge in the men's.
Yeah, yep. Look, that's I'd back you on that. Now let's go on to last year's race briefly, shall we? Probably not even briefly. And as we know, this podcast or this thing has a bit of a coxswain slant, and there is nothing greater than seeing a race like this, where as Rob was saying before, there's so much more to this than a than a standard boat race. And obviously the coxswains absolutely make a massive impact in this sort of event. On any river course they do, but this in particular, when it's literally a match race, you've got a lot of water and you've got a lot of space to work with. It's not as simple as ducking over 10 metres to your bow or stern, your left or right. There's so much more to it. And last year, do you want to walk us through what happened last year, John? Because I know you're across it, and tell us what the big move that inevitably determined the outcome of that race.
Well, the amazing thing about the boat race is how fast both crews go at the start. They almost go as fast as a 2,000-metre Olympic crew. Yeah. And the reason they do that is they want to basically get in front of the other crew, get the advantage so they can stay in the middle of the stream where the incoming tide's coming. So then start about an hour and a half before high tide. So that's when the tide's coming in at its most. So the coxers go out super fast so they can stay in the middle of the course and get in front of the other crew. Last year's conditions were deplorable, basically, and there were waves coming over the boats. And they got towards Craven Cottage, which is just a few hundred metres past the start. And the Cambridge Cox, Jasper, I can't remember his surname.
Jasper Parrish,
and his brother was the 7th seat. He took the biggest punt of his life and decided to take the Cambridge crew right across to the Middlesex side of the river in what people think slack water, because he thought it would be more sheltered water, because you could see Oxford, who are on the Surrey station, which is the preferred station, were getting waves coming over their boat and really struggling with their blade work. And Jasper went over to Craven Cottage, and the Australian cox in the Oxford boat thought she'd actually go and try and join him. He got about a length in front after a few hundred metres in the race, and they never let it go, because that master stroke is saying, well, the stream is too rough. I'm going to take my crew over to the more sheltered water, even though it's slack water, and they got a length very quickly.
Absolutely amazing work, and apparently it was off the cuff. It wasn't. There was no discussion before with a coach or anything. He's just done the old, I'm going to call the shot. That's a risky one, because if you get that wrong at that level, you've got a lot of accountability, don't you?
And it was amazing. The other amazing part about the race was the Oxford stroke was so Felix Drinkwater, I think his name was. He was so desperate to win after his 4th attempt and hadn't won. About 100 metres to go, he pretty much broke down, and then he collapsed at finish and had to be taken out of the boat by an emergency dinghy. So it just shows the passion that these oars people have in the race.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, fourth attempt, jeepers. I mean, obviously you can only have so many because you're only going to be at university so long. But that's a brutal one, isn't it? You sort of hope that you can get there after 4 goes at it. That's for sure. I think there was two interesting things there. Not only did he take that punt and went across towards that slack water to get the protection, is he also got a little bit lucky in that the Oxford crew came across as well. And you know, it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if they had stayed out there and battled the conditions and took on the current. I mean, you're really fighting an uphill, and it's if you look at that corner, there's a hell of a lot of distance to be saved going in. So it was a very brilliant call.
The hard thing about also, if you stay out in the current, you know, you'd be surprised how much the boat gets pushed sideways. And the side pressure on the boat slows the boat down a hell of a lot. But also trying to manage that sort of, even though I remember sculling on the Yarra, you know, if you had a bit of stream, you could actually feel it throw the boat sideways and around, and especially on a river course that's a tidal course and it's a fast flowing tidal course, you'd be surprised how much it throws the boat around. So that was a masterful idea and masterful piece of coxing to go into the water where you could actually accelerate the boat above that the rough water and the challenging water. That a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, I know it's. I notice the same thing when you are in the single, and singles feel it a lot more than obviously an 8. But you do feel yourself getting thrown around on the Yarra, that's for sure. Especially when there's a bit of current around. But I'm all for a bit of dead water, aren't I, John? You know that we've had some controversy on that topic.
Well, I don't think the stakes were quite as high, but yes, yeah.
Oh, what are you talking about? We came 10th. We could have come 9th. You know, if I had made a different decision, possibly. I think that's pretty important. No, you're quite right. The stakes were not near the same. I think, would the stakes even be bigger? I mean, it is up there. You're up there at the highest level of stakes, really, aren't you? When you're making those decisions, and good on him. I think the interesting thing there, though, is that he had not just the nous to do it, but he had the confidence to do it, which meant that he had a team, and I don't mean just the rowers, I mean obviously the support everywhere, gave him the confidence to actually take that risk. And I think that's important in rowing, that there's a whole level of support. And again, I'm talking as a coxswain, being a coxswain's website that this is, and I'm talking to any young coxswains who might be listening to this. Have the confidence to make the decisions, but to the others, make sure you have the support of the coxswains, because everyone has to take a punt. And if you're in sport and you're out there to compete and you're fair income about it and you want to win, you have to take risks. Doesn't matter what the sport is, you have to take risks. In a 2K or a 1K, the risk might be 300 metres in and the boat in front of you has gone off the front, and you're going, well, this ain't part of our race plan, but we're here to win, so let's have a crack. And that might be the risk, but it's all part of it, isn't it? Part of the fun.
The challenge. Sorry, John, you go.
No, you go, Rob.
I was just going to say, having that, I suppose that trust in your cox and having that relationship to the cox when you're under duress, especially when you're a mile and a half, 2 miles in, just to know that the person steering the boat and the brains of the boat has got your back. And it's so important for coxes to create that relationship, not just with the people in the boat, but with the coaches and the support staff, and ensure that they've done their homework as well. Obviously all the rowers, they do all the homework by all the training and weights and nutrition. It's also important for coxes to do their homework on knowing the course, having plan B, plan C, plan F, all lined up ready to go. Depending on what happens, it is just as much coxswain's race as it is the power in the boat.
Now, we spoke about this briefly, actually, Rob, on the phone the other day, and you were commenting as a coach how supportive you are of coxers and how important you think they sort of are in the crew dynamic, and not just sitting there pulling strings and doing what they're told, but communicating and all those things.
Yeah, and whenever that's one of those things when I'm coaching, whenever I stop, we stop the crew to turn, I'll ask the cops to understand what I'm explaining, so they know the technical side of the sport. And I as a coach, especially at the first aid or a club level, I'll probably spend more time coaching the cox than I do. I mean, yes, obviously coaching the boat, but making sure that the cox has that relationship with the boys and understands what to look for, and by having the cox having that knowledge, that then they can make those decisions, and the boys won't question. Oh, sorry, I should say the crew won't question them. It's so important.
Yeah. We're going a little bit off topic, but I do want to ask this while I've got you on here. With training out of boat training, what would you have your coxswains do? Would you have them joining in?
A lot of the training, yeah. It's important that, especially the coxswains, to understand. It's hard for the coxswains to understand, what you're feeling at 400 metres in, 1,100 metres in. And a good friend of mine, Richard Hamilton, who's straight British 896, said to me, he loves the analogy of just 800 metres in, your lungs want to jump out of your body. You have to have a cox who understands and shows empathy, understands what you're feeling. And it's important that the coxes, they train, they understand. When I was lucky enough to have it in my first day at school, Cox was a long distance runner, cross-country runner. So he knew exactly what it was like when the pressure's on and how to keep your head about yourself. So the Coxes a lot of the time have to understand, that the duress and the pressure that the oars people are under.
Yeah, look, I agree. And one of the other YouTube things I've been, as I said, watching a lot, brushing up ahead of getting some understanding about this race. But one of the comments from one of the coxswains was, to be a successful coxswain, you have to understand sport.
Yeah. And
I think that's, and you have to be a competitor. Well, obviously everyone is a competitor by default. You'd hope so. So they I think, as you're saying there, it's great if they've got another activity that they may do from a physical perspective, that they understand the testing of those barriers and the discomfort that you can encounter. I certainly work on that theory, as John knows, but I think it's important to know, because you can't just keep whipping a horse, so to speak. You need to understand that it needs to go for a period of time and have a bit of recovery on the way through as well. Yeah,
definitely. And it's so important to have all 9 people on the boat on the same page and wanting the same outcome. And understanding how you get to that outcome, instead of just, as you said, whipping a horse. It's about understanding, we're at this point. I know my son rode Head River on Saturday, and in the heat, the cox said, I know you're feeling it, 500 metres to go, but I need you to step it up again. And they did, and the boys did really, really well, considering where they started the season. But having that sort of understanding for a cox and understanding how the boys are feeling, and that you're a motivator. I think we've said something about you're almost like a Formula One driver.
Yes, yeah.
You have to be very analytical.
Absolutely, and knowing what the machine can do. I suppose at least a Formula One driver has a mechanical system around them instead of a human system with emotion and opinion.
I think the other interesting aspect is some of the best coaches are coxes.
Yeah. It seems to be that way, doesn't it?
And I think they learn leadership early on. Again, I know this is a cox's journey. And having been involved in school rowing as a parent, I'm not sure there's quite that understanding of how much of a leadership role a cox takes in the crew.
Yeah. No, you're right. I don't think they do understand that, because it's not really enforced a lot, is it really?
Well, no, and I think that the outcome of some of the best coaches have been coxes previously. It's probably just indicative of how important and how, to Rob's point, how motivational and how empathetic they've got to be, which obviously are great traits of a great coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very much so.
Now, just getting back to the boat race, that's what we're here about. There is a bit of conjecture here, and I'm not sure, having not been there, and I'm hoping Alistair does jump in. I know it's early in the morning for him over there. He's all ready to go, but his alarm clock might not have gone off. But if he does jump in, we'll be able to clarify all this. But there is a bit of a concern I have, is that on the boat race website, it shows that there is 9 pubs that you can watch the race from. Yet, when I've done a little bit of research, I reckon there's 10. And I think this is an important statistic. And if you've got, 300,000 people, as you're saying, John, down there on Saturday, whether there's 9 or 10 pubs is pretty important, wouldn't you think? Oh, there we go.
I'm actually counting 11.
Oh, God, controversy. 11 pubs.
What was my favourite was the Duke's Head, which was in Putney, where I lived for 4 years, and that's pretty much on the start line.
So actually, hang on. So have you witnessed this event live in the past?
I have. I actually saw the start of the 2000 boat race, and the two things that surprised me most were, as I've said just a few minutes ago, how fast these oarsmen went.
Yeah.
And there was a massive crew lining the Putney embankment. So the two crews go off at super rating, which surprised me, but that's so they can get in front quickly and get in position.
Yep.
The other thing that really surprised me was the wash that all of the spectators in the official boats trailing the two Cambridge and Oxford boats made totally engulfed the spectators on the embankment. They weren't ready for it. They kicked a tsunami of Thames water, which went over the crowd. Thankfully, I was a bit higher up, but they were the two things I remember most. Super fast rating and a super big wash from probably 10 or 15 flotilla boats following the two crews.
Well, on that start you're talking about, one of the things I was watching the other day, and I might be wrong in who I'm naming or the timing, but the principle is exactly the same. It was the women's race, and I can't remember who was where or what. But there was one crew that had made that move in front. They'd gone to the middle of the river, and the strategy that had been discussed with the coaches, do you know where I'm going with this one? You might. The strategy was that if that crew gets in front, they're going to run into them. And they'd already spoken to the umpire, and the umpire had said, if you bump into them and they have got in your way, they will be disqualified. Now, I'm not going to dob anyone in. I don't like that, to be honest. That's not how you would want to be doing it or winning. But that was their strategy, and whichever crew cut in front of the other, that the crew behind went hammer and tong that was their push. That was their finish line, basically, because they wanted to hit that boat. And they didn't. They didn't hit the boat, and then they blew up, of course.
I think it probably shows how much of an advantage being in the front on that stream can be.
Yeah. That you're literally focusing so much on that and coming up with a strategy to win the race by having the other crew kicked out because you've run into them.
And the challenge for the crew with that is when you're so focused on them and the other crew, you forget what you're doing and you go slow.
Absolutely right. But isn't that the whole beauty of all of this, though, Rob? Isn't that the whole beauty of the match racing concept? Because it is one-on-one, and if we get back to last year and the Cox doing what they did and the other crew, the Oxford crew followed it across. The Oxford crew maybe should have stayed on their game plan, but they didn't.
Yeah.
But the added dimension with this one, unlike Henley, which is one-on-one straight line, is massively large bends in the course. You've got the stream, you've got the income side, you're going upstream, so against the current, which I think will come into play on the weekend. So back to your earlier point, massively tactical race in terms of where you position the boats, how you get in front of the other one, and your line. Yeah,
absolutely. No, I think that's what makes it even more exciting, to be honest. Without doubt, I've just realised something that's possibly Alistair thinks we're doing this on Saturday night.
Hope not. I think I did tell him when it was.
Yeah, that's all right. No, look, he was certainly very keen only a few hours ago. I don't want to drop out just yet because I did say come in at about 8:20, but he might have got his times out of whack because being over there on the other side of the world, so to speak. But it'd be great to get some input from him as to what's going on. But it is one of those ones where I'm actually contemplating getting up in the morning. I am a bit more invested this time round. I've not before. And when we started scrolling on the bottom here, 1:46 a.m. Sunday morning, the women's race.
Now, see if I can remind him. I'm going to text him now and see where he is.
Oh yeah, good idea. Yeah. Good call. He might be going, how do I get into this thing or something like that? But it would be good. John, are you gonna get up early to have a watch of this one, or you wait for the YouTube replay?
No, I think I'll wait till Sunday morning when I wake up to see that both my predictions were wrong, or three. Three predictions, 300,000 people along the banks, Cambridge to beat Oxford in the men. And we better have a quick chat about the women.
Oh, we had, good point. We haven't gone there yet. I apologise. 300K on the bank. Cambridge to win. All right. And so you're going to have a female as well. All right, let's go. Let's talk about the women cruise.
Well, the women's crew is interesting because Cambridge, every single person except for the stroke either rowed in the winning crew last year. 2 of them rowed in the winning crew. Another 5 rowed in the winning reserve crew. And the stroke's from America, but she's a gold medalist. So that's Cambridge. And the Oxford women's crew is stroked by an Australian, a St Catherine's girl.
Oh, right.
So
from that winning Henley crew, do we know?
2016 St Cass girl she was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, of course, getting ages out of whack, aren't we?
Yeah, we sort of. There seems to be, the Frederick Roper from Geelong. He was 2017. Augustus John, he's from Toowong in Queensland. He's in the Cambridge boat. So it seems to be 5-6 years out. But stroke. Annie Azakis is a St Catherine's girl. And Oxford have 4 returning oars women, but unfortunately none of them have won the boat race. They are favourites, but again, I'm going to go with Cambridge because their crew, I think, has had the experience winning over the course as reserves or actually the winning boat last year.
I have a different theory, John, as to why you choose Cambridge.
Light blue?
Light blue. The old Geelong grammar kit that they happen to have on. Or it might be the other way around, of course, but,
It was actually after Eton, Geelong grammar, but that's another story.
Yeah, that's right. But look, it could all be the same. It's the same as Eton as well, isn't it? Of course.
It is.
Of course, and it worked well.
So I'm going to back the Cambridge women's crew, again, against the punters, but as a non-gambling man, it's only going to affect my reputation, not the bank balance.
Well, that's true. Actually, I wonder if there are odds on this sort of event. There could well be, couldn't there? Because, the way it works over there, I'm not suggesting that we be gambling here, but this is after the kiddie shuttle. This is not the school girls we're talking about here, so we can look at this sort of things, can't we? Let's see if there is any odds on the boat race. There might be some bookies out there.
There are odds. I can actually give you the odds.
Oh, you've got odds. Even better.
55, which is actually probably £1.55.
Yeah.
The Cambridge men are 240.
Oh, wow. Okay. 240 in a 2-horse race. That's, yeah.
I'm going against...
I'm not a gambling man in any shape, way or form. There's a lot better things to spend your money on, but $2.40 for Cambridge, it sounds like they've got an idea. I've just found it here now. Yeah, you're quite right. Oh, dead heat, 100-1. There has been only one dead heat. Yes.
The other thing, perhaps to touch on, are the umpires in the race.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Because the umpiring the boat race is a very prestigious role, and it's actually quite a challenging role because you might have seen last year. There were lots of, trying to keep the crews apart. We saw Jasper Parrish went off to Craven Cottage. So the women's race is being umpired by Richard Phelps, who's an Olympian, and the men's race is being umpired by Sir Matthew Pinson.
Ah, right.
From Redgrave and Pinson, the great pair.
Yep.
Pinson's significant amount of gold medals. So umpiring the race, I think, is quite prestigious, but also quite challenging. Just keep the crews apart, keep them on track, and disqualify them, to your earlier point, if they get through, I guess.
It's a big call, isn't it? The old disqualification in an event like that. You'd want to be right.
Yeah, and sorry,
Rob.
Well, last year, move over, and it was just a lot of ignoring the umpires for a lot of the. They'd move a fraction and get a bit of traction with the umpire, then they go back. It was just so interesting to watch.
I think the trick is pretty simple. You just move your arm forward. You don't have to actually touch the string at all. And, he's trying to turn. There must be something wrong with his rudder.
The other interesting part about the umpiring is, unlike Henley, where they're resplendent in a blazer and a boater and they're looking marvellous, the umpires for the boat race typically look like they're going to Antarctica. Roped up and sort of, the absolute...
Well, I think that gives you a feel for what the conditions are really like, though, doesn't it? Because it is probably like being in Antarctica.
Exactly.
And then it again comes down to the training, and they're out there in the dark and that sort of in those conditions. It's very, very impressive stuff. Very impressive stuff.
I think the other thing to also just touch on is that these aren't professional athletes. These are elite academics, as in studying at two of the world's best universities, doing incredibly demanding courses. Yet they're training 30 hours a week. So it's extraordinary. They're extraordinary athletes and individuals, I think.
And I think if I looked on the, I did look briefly on the Cambridge Boat Club website and looked at their values. And one of their values, and I don't quote it exactly, but it was along the lines as to be exceptional at winning boat races, or successful at winning boat races and exceptional at your studies, or whatever it actually was. So we're not talking about your average punter, these people. They're extreme outliers in every sense of the word. And as you said, they're not elite athletes. They're not getting paid to do it in any shape, way, or form. One could argue some fees might be covered, but they're not getting paid to do it, and they're still doing it to this level and this much work. It's amazing. It shows. It actually probably goes to show that the pride that comes with it too.
Yeah.
Well, indeed, having been involved in school rowing, there was always that argument that rowing doesn't detract from your studies. It can actually enhance your studies because it teaches you how to prioritise time. Because a lot of people think if you spend too much time on rowing, then it'll sacrifice your academic capabilities. And I think watching the boat race, the men and women, it's the pinnacle of how that can not be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I've spoken about this numerous times on podcasts about the organisation of these sort of athletes, that they are so well structured in their life, and they're very focused, driven individuals, just like us, John, down at Hawthorn, just like us, very focused, very motivated, very driven by our successes. What are you laughing at there, Rob? There's nothing funny about this.
No, we're just listening to it. It's enjoyable. Listen to you guys talk about Hawthorn, and you're still out in the boat. It's great.
Still having a go. You should come down and have a paddle one day.
No, I've had a few of the boys get in my ear, so
yeah.
Now the hardest part is starting.
Is what?
It's starting.
Oh, it is. Yeah. It's like everything, isn't it? Yeah. Hey, have you had any feedback from Alistair at all? Do we know?
No response, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think he's had a technical glitch. That's all right. He was very fired up. I'm just worrying that he might have got his days wrong because of the time zones and all of that sort of stuff, because we've had quite a bit of communication back and forward, and he was very keen to jump in. It would be great to have got some information. He was a Goldie rower, I believe, and for those that don't know, Goldie is the reserves. It makes it sound so second-rate, doesn't it? But my God, it's nowhere near second-rate Goldie, and I think the Oxford one is called Blondie. I wanted to ask him what that all meant, because what does Goldie and Blondie mean? But I think their boat club's called Goldie, isn't it, at Cambridge?
I think it's named after a person.
Ah, that would make sense.
The Goldie Boat Shed. I think it's named after a former coach or rower.
So do you reckon Oxford just copied the Goldie theme and said, we'll go Blondie then?
I thought they were ISIS, but I could be wrong.
Oh, dear. Anyway, well, look.
Sorry.
Oh, it actually, the interesting thing too we should mention, because obviously we know it, but people listening in might not. The whole thing, to pick your lane, is a simple old coin toss. Oh, geez, a lot of pressure on that coin toss, isn't there?
Well, I tried to do some research on how many coin toss winners ultimately win the boat race.
Oh, yeah.
and how many on Surrey versus Middlesex win the boat race. And I haven't been able to find those statistics, so they're not that easily available. But they seem to put a lot of importance on trying to win that boat race, and the Surrey side is typically the preferred side because
I suppose if you have that cracking start we're talking about, John, it doesn't become as relevant because you might have a length and a half up, and then you can just do what you want and make your crew suffer and stay there.
Well, the Surrey side, you get the inside lane on the big bend, let's call it, but you get the outside lane at the start and the finish. So I guess the theory is you go out hard, get in front, you got the inside running on the big bend.
Yep.
And then you can, hopefully get in front and cut the corner to the finish after Barnes Bridge.
Yep. Look, it makes sense, and obviously weather plays a factor on what station you might want when that sort of comes into play. But the biggest interesting thing I've heard tonight is 300,000 spectators, as you call. If you had said 50,000, I thought, that's a big turnout. Jesus, so normally it's 200,000, is it?
250.
God, that's insane.
And that's the other thing just to touch on, a 6.8 kilometre course.
Yeah, good point.
The record is Cambridge in 1998. It's 16 minutes and 19 seconds. The women's record was Cambridge in 2022 at 18 minutes 23. So I guess that's the level of work that they're doing, and I don't think they drop much below 36, 38.
They don't. It's just strap yourself in, isn't it?
Oh, so just
how many hours of ergos go into all of that?
Oh, but I guess that's why it's interesting that such an event has such appeal, because it's just pure, brutal, gladiatorial competition.
Yeah.
9 versus 9. The boats are exactly the same. There's no. It's not like sailing where you've got a bigger, longer boat. It's just, and it still attracts 200,000 plus people to watch it every year.
Yeah. No, you're quite right. It's and again, I knew about it, but having done a little bit of look into it in the last week or so, it really has captured my interest. That's for sure, and we'll continue to, I think, because it's certainly an impressive event. And again, I love it because of the coxswain input and what it all has. But it was interesting just watching, and we'll finish up in a minute because obviously Alistair's been held up. But what was interesting is
actually.
Sorry,
he's a couple of minutes away.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll yap for a few more moments, so we won't hold him forever, obviously. But it'd be great to get some feedback from him. But there was a race. They had some training between the Cambridge men versus the Dutch crew, I think, back in January. And it was great to watch because the coxers were deliberately crashing the boats. And what I liked about that is seeing, and I'm not suggesting to the young coxswains that's the strategy to take. I had a great deal of that on the weekend myself, of some oar clashing as a rower, and that was fine. But what happens is you get a little bit out of whack because you get into panic mode, and I think that's part of the strategy, of course, too. But it was interesting that the Dutch crew came across and banged into the Cambridge crew, and it caused the two-man to have a massive crab and dropped them a length and a half. So it's a bit of a risky one if you're going to play that game and get it wrong.
Very much.
But that's on YouTube. It's worth looking up, actually. The Cambridge men versus the Dutch crew in January. They did 3 pieces down the course. It wasn't the whole length. They did sort of a couple of pieces, and Cambridge sorted them out pretty well.
Yeah, terrific.
But there is a lot of that on YouTube. It's amazing how much. Oh, here we go. We've been given a link to the odds. I don't know if I should be putting that on there. Thanks, Glenn, for your. I'll take that. I can't put that on there. It's an adult show. We can put it on there, but betting odds. There you go. So, Glenn, if you're watching, who are you going to have your money on? But anyway, Glenn was an old boarding school buddy of mine. We shared a dorm together. That's all we shared, John. I know where you're going to go with this. I know Scotch has reputations, but we're on that adult hour now, so it's safe. But no, nothing like that at all. Nothing like that at all. Glenn's backing Oxford. There we go. He's taken the favourite. You didn't listen to John, obviously, Glenn, but
Well,
thanks for
he just intelligently ignored it.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Well, anyway, we've got a minute or two to fill in. This is that high pressure that comes onto the host at the time when you've got to try and fill in some blank while we're waiting. But that's all right. We'll think of something to talk about. What have you got else to add, John, from your research? You've got all sorts of stats there. You've shown me the pieces of paper you've got all over your desk. There must be something more down there that we can go into.
We could talk about the history of the race.
Well,
the very first one was 1829 for the men, and the first one for the women was 1927.
Yep.
It became an annual event in 1856 for the men, and an annual event in 1964 for the women. It's only been stopped, I think, 3 times in its history: World War One, World War Two, and COVID.
And good old COVID, I believe that is correct, yes.
Yeah, and then I think it was 2020, either 2020 or 2021, it got moved to Ely. So it's normally always from Putney to Mortlake in the Thames.
Yep.
But one of the COVID years, it got moved to Cambridge, which is where Cambridge train.
Right.
And it looks like an enormously large drain, not unlike Carrum, but apparently it's good training facility.
Right. Well, so am I right in saying that Cambridge have basically won the last 5 with one exception?
They have, and they've also won the most. They've won 86 wins overall versus Oxford's 81. And when it comes to the women, Cambridge have won 45, Oxford have won 30. So Cambridge overall has certainly won more. So I'm just looking at that comment there.
Yeah, just Max Kitson's just jumped in to mention Jock Luge from the King's School in Parramatta had a win for Oxford against Cambridge. He also founded the SAS during World War II. Ah, well, there's an interesting stat. Thanks, Max. God, we had to rely on outside sources now. That's what's happening here. We're right at they know we're struggling. Oh, here comes Alistair. He's in the green room. Alistair, I'm going to bring you on. Thank God you've come in. We're running out of things to say. We even had the punters listening in starting to provide content for us. I'm going to bring you in, Alistair.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Alistair, it is great to meet you. Thank you for joining us at this, I'm not going to say ungodly hour of the morning because it's probably late for you over there, is it?
We're coming up on about, 10 to 10. So I'm just my apologies, everyone. We've been late. We've had to move our spares racing today back a couple of hours and getting that's been one of the parts.
Absolutely no problem at all. Apologising, not necessary. We got to cover some more interesting stuff, but the problem is we didn't know anything of what we were talking about, and you might have just fact checked us, and we could have looked embarrassed along the way. But that's okay.
I wouldn't worry about that. My career here is basically being based on saying things and then trying to make the facts match what I say.
Sounds like rowing to me. Sounds like coxing, actually. Hey, Alistair, just give us a very brief synopsis on what you do over there.
So I work for the club. What we try and do is support our coaches and our athletes so they can effectively just turn up. So my role includes functions, driving trailers, doing compliance, and working with prospective athletes, because although neither Oxford or Cambridge have sporting scholarships or you getting in easily to the university because of your rowing, fortunately rowing's got a lot of really smart people. And the people we have rowing the boat race every year are some brilliantly smart people who also happen to be really good athletes.
Yeah.
And we're very lucky to race as the profile that it does. So we try and make sure the boat
we touched on that just before, Alistair. I used the term that they're all serious outliers in that they're not your average punters, these people. They're not just great athletes, that they're the high end of everything that they do.
Yeah, I very much agree. We have a number of our athletes who are PhD students, and they're publishing papers in physics, physiology, electronic engineering, and working on future technologies that are just amazing. So it's a real privilege to be able to work with these people. And
Actually, a genuine question out of interest, and this is obviously a across the board thing. But what sort of, sleep is an extraordinarily important part in physical training, probably the most important part. What sort of hours? This might sound like a silly question, but what sort of hours sleep do these guys get? Because if they're mixing their study with the levels of training that they're doing, you can't find 8 to 9 hours in a day, surely.
You tend to sort of probably be an hour or so short every day, most days, and make it up on a rest day. Having said that, our women's president was a Gates Scholar, which the Oxford equivalent is a Rhodes Scholar. Jenna is doing a PhD in physiology. She has her set up. She'll get up at basically 5:15, 5 mornings a week to make the train out to early, and she will leave meetings, etc., at about 8:15 to be in bed for 8:30. So it's diligence to be able to get it done. But
it's serious discipline, isn't it? Serious discipline and motivation.
But there are other courses which aren't quite as heavy. Our men's president is doing a PhD in film studies, and Seb has a I would say an easier life than Jenna. He doesn't have a 9-to-5 lab job basically.
Yeah,
he watches films on 1940s and 1950s representations of automobiles in French and Italian cinema.
It's probably a little bit different, isn't it? But let's not discredit that. They're being very rude about the poor guy.
There's a lot of very interesting sort of economic and political and sociological stuff within it, but he's a lot more flexible in his timetable than Jenna is.
Sure.
If you're in a physics lab, you have to be
Am I right in saying he's the bowman, Alistair? Am I right
in saying he's the bowman? So
based on some great statistics John was just giving us a little bit earlier, that means he'll be the stroke next year?
We'd love to have him for another year. We can't. So we're restricted at Cambridge by the number of... We have an agreement with Oxford which dictates the rules of the boat race. And one of those is you're allowed 4 years as an undergraduate and 4 years as a postgraduate. So Seb came as a master's student in 2021 and has had 3 years as a PhD student. So even if he's here next year, we can't use him.
Oh
wow!
So there is literally a gentleman's agreement between the two universities,
yes,
as to the rules of engagement, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, very much so. So back in the day, admission standards perhaps weren't quite as rigid as they were. One of our presidents years ago said he got into Cambridge on an A, a C, and a D in his A-levels, which is probably about a low 80s ATAR.
Yep.
So you wouldn't get in. You wouldn't get considered without a 99.5 ATAR now as an undergraduate. So it's a bit of a different beast than it was 30 years ago. So
yeah, sure.
And both clubs had extremely good athletes who are very smart guys, but they may not have been particularly diligent in their studies getting into Cambridge or Oxford. And it was a bit of Wild West. Oxford had a guy who was actually lecturing at a professor level, but he hadn't submitted his PhD. He'd taken 8 years to do his PhD, and that's part of the reason these rules came about. It's very much trying to keep the race above board, trying to have the amateur student athlete ethos. So it's the rules of engagement. It's trying to keep the race as pure and as relevant as it could be.
Which is fantastic. I think that I'm all for that in all sport, and especially as sport becomes more professional, we lose track of a lot of that, don't we? We end up going down the all sorts of whatever rule you can go, whatever journey you can go down to get a success, whatever you might call that.
Yeah.
Hey, Alistair, can I ask something? I obviously over here we know a lot about. Well, we know of the boat race. And as I was saying before, I was quite naive to the magnitude of this event until I started doing a bit of research in the last week or so. John made a comment earlier on that one of his tips for the weekend being a Saturday, there might be a crowd of 300,000 people. I assumed it was just a joke and he was pulling my leg. And it sounds like that is a sort of a possibility that you get those levels of numbers.
We'll have around in the intermediate area around the Thames embankment, around Putney, the first couple hundred yards, there'll be 50,000, 60,000 people at least. And then there'll be people along the course all the way. There are fun parks and millions of people watching on TV. So
yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but it's very English. If you were going to have a university boat race, you wouldn't start if you're starting now, you wouldn't do what we do now. You'd have a fair course. You'd have a course which is affected by wind and tide and all that sort of stuff. But because it's so very English and almost unfair by nature, that's what makes it what it is. You never know.
But it isn't it also all of that makes it so spectacular? Is that the variables, and we were talking about it quite a bit earlier, last year's race and the call from Jasper Parrish and what he did in that coxswain seat. Isn't that part of the whole excitement of what this is all about? It's not 2K down a straight line. There's so many more complexities to it.
And look, I've got to be honest. We were watching the race as we were going up to Mortlake and seeing Jasper's course, and the initial reaction was, "Oh God, what's he done? What's happened?" What you saw last year's race, there'd been an issue with the steering before the race. So Rob, the men's chief coach, was hanging under the boat and fixing steering. And I thought, "Oh God, his steering's busted." And he worked out that if he moved over towards Middlesex, it was a lot smoother. He lost a little bit of stream, but it was much, much smoother. And what he did by forcing Anna O'Hanlon, the Oxford Cox, she had to follow him. Yeah. So she moved both into bad water and worse stream. So it was.
Yeah. So she got hit twice on that one.
Yeah, and if she'd stayed in her line, who knows? And it's one of those things that Jasper's coxing will be talked about for 30 or 40 years. It doesn't happen. Yeah. So.
Yeah. But, legendary stuff, really, wasn't it?
Exactly, and you have to create legend in this sport. Like, we have a reunion on Saturday night for our 1984 men's crew. They were the first crew to race on a Sunday. They raced on a Sunday because they hit one of the moored buoys and snapped the bow off their boat on the warm-up. So they had to go and get another boat and race the next day.
Dear.
Yeah, it's history, and it's just the insanity of the race is just marvelous. Like, it's something I think we celebrate pretty much.
Now, can you just briefly run us through the reserve boats? Because I didn't realise there was reserve boats as such, and there are unusual names for the reserve boats. They're probably not unusual at all if you know what they mean. So what is the origin of Goldie and Blondie, for argument's sake?
Oh, okay. So John Goldie he's actually also the boathouse in Cambridge is named after John Goldie. He turned around a run of Oxford wins, I think 7 or 8 in a row in the late 1860s. He stroked all 4 years that he was at Cambridge and won 3 out of 4 and created a period of Cambridge dominance. So when the club built the boathouse in 1882, he was the natural name for that. And that became the second boat's name. And that's been racing since 1964. Before then, there was a reserve boat that would race the heads and all that sort of thing, but they wouldn't race on race day. Race day was the men's blue boat.
Yep.
Blondie came along in the 70s, and that was, I think, the idea of making something that sounded a bit like Goldie, and it was perhaps apocryphally named after Debbie Harry was quite big at the time, so the Hey Blondie came. I don't know whether it's true, but it's a great story.
So, John, I was actually right what I said before. They did take a jump off the old Goldie thing and say, "Well, we'll go Blondie." The female reserve crews, they've got more I don't know, fancy sounding names.
Goldie and Osiris. So Osiris, the Isis is the stretch of the Thames through Oxford. So that's an easy one for them to name. And Osiris being the female counterpart to Isis, that was how they came up with that one.
So that's not so fancy.
They but it is quite fun. So every so often you hear someone say their son's rowing for ISIS, and someone will comment, "What, your son's what?"
Yeah, you don't know if you like the sound of that one.
But for both clubs, it's a really important development bit for us. So, especially on the women's side, we've had a lot of fantastic athletes come through they've learnt to row at Cambridge and they've been to the Olympics, things like that. Imogen Grant, who's in the white double, she learnt to row at Cambridge. Sarah Winkless, who's a multiple Olympic medal, world champion medalist, learnt to row at Cambridge. It's been really successful like that. So having those second boats, and indeed this year a men's third boat as a development boat, is huge for us.
Yeah.
It's a really important part. at Cambridge, 50% of the students will row at some point.
Wouldn't it also assist the squad as such, because you're obviously you've got two chances now to actually row it, not just the one chance, so to speak.
And at the borderlines of both those boats are very, very tight. The men's boat finalised the selection probably 2-3 weeks out from the race, and there was still a couple of those seats could have gone either way in that last week or two. So it keeps everyone very honest.
Yeah, keeps on their toes.
Exactly.
I also wasn't aware how many sort of lead-up sort of hit-outs that these crews have, and I was watching one I was just talking about earlier between the Cambridge men versus that Dutch crew about 6 weeks ago it was, and that was interesting to see that the Cambridge sorted out the Dutch pretty well.
Yeah, I'll be honest, we were probably a bit surprised by that. The Dutch crew was very well repped. In their defence, they did have two of their guys get sick during the week, and they flew in subs 2 days before the race. But everyone in that boat had been to under 23s or senior worlds, and it was Simon, the 6-seater, medalled in 2022, and I think maybe in 2023. So these are the guys that are on the cusp of the Dutch team. They're their development boat for 2028.
Yeah.
So we had a great day. Our guys handled the rough better than the Dutch, and they also came out better from that clash.
Yeah. Now, there was some interesting clashing going on. I did enjoy that as a coxswain watching that. I love a bit of argy-bargy. It's all a bit of fun.
Just sit there, put a hole in that bloke's boat, or smash his oar. But there's less of that on race day. I think the umpires are very much make sure it's a clean race and a fair race. So we don't want the race to be decided by someone breaking the rules.
No. Of course not. And of course, number one is safety. I mean, these at the end of the day, these are big boats that move quickly. And if during a clash someone got flung out of a boat, it could be pretty. Yeah, could be a pretty grim situation.
And it's also very fast-moving water. So you're doing the race record 4.25 miles upstream. So best part of 7 k's upstream, 16 minutes. So fast boats, but that water is chomping along.
Yeah. And these poor buggers train in it during winter. That is what astounds me, Alistair, is they have to work so hard during the worst of the possible season in the coldest of environments. Yeah,
well, look, we're quite lucky. I think we lost, in the last 15 years, we've probably lost 5 or 6 days because of cold. Last year, we hit the river actually froze over, and that hasn't happened for many years. Had a couple of weeks, a week or so, not getting boat. But generally at Ely, it's a really good place to row. It's basically a ditch. It's a canal, so it's below the surrounding land. You can get a bit blowy, but it's never horrendous. It's never unrowable. And we've got basically a 5K dead straight course. It's a fantastic place to go rowing. Yeah, it's not a beautiful place you'll ever go rowing because there's I got to see apart from some cows on the train line, but if you think about going up on the Pean or somewhere, you get through the narrows and you go up on the Pean. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
the image is not. There's no point in looking out. There's nothing to see, but it makes the rowing really good. It means you can.
Well, it's good. It's good for your training the mental aptitude, then, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Like sitting on the ergo, as I keep saying. John gets me sick of saying is train the brain.
Yep. Well,
that's what you're doing with that sort of stuff. So, now, Alistair, just a quick. What's your tips? Who's going to win? And I want unbiased opinion, of course. I'm not going to get it, but we'll try.
Oh, if you're unbiased, you're never going to get. No. To be honest, we are going in on our senior boat, our heavyweight boats, as outsiders. The Oxford men's boat is an extremely good boat. It gutted Fred Roper went to Oxford rather than Cambridge. I think if you're Australian, you should be going here. But they're a really good boat. But what our men's coaches have done the last couple of years is make boats that have won when they shouldn't. And I really believe our men's boat can win, but Oxford should go in as favourites. They really should.
Yep.
They're a great bunch of athletes, and they deserve to be favourites. However, I'm still going to both. I can still be putting money on Cambridge. There's emotion in there. It's not going to be totally objective. But
yep.
On our women's side, I think it's going to be the first really good women's race since the Boat Race women's side. It's been quite uneven. The first 2 years, Oxford were light years. Then we've had 6 years to get one. and haven't really looked like. Again, Oxford go in as favourites, but our women have come on massively in the last couple of weeks and significantly quicker. So I wouldn't want to put money on that one.
Yeah.
Our lightweights, I think, will win. I think our lightweight men have been extremely good. Their fixtures have been great, and our lightweight women are both. The lightweight boats are very, very new for lightweight women in terms of the athletes. I think our athletes gain a lot by training with our heavyweight athletes. So again, I'm Cambridge there. Then we have other races like the Spares, which are just about to happen. That one, I don't really know what's going to happen there. And we also have a veterans boat race on Friday too, where it's a short course.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's great fun as long as you don't take it too seriously. But it's good fun because you have to be over 35, crew average I think has to be over 40, and you only race the falls.
And what distance is that one over, Alistair? You said a shortened course.
Yeah, so that's about 2 miles. It's a bit less than half course.
So for a potentially unfit 35-year-old, that's a hell of a long way.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is, we also have some very fit guys in their 50s to carry them along.
Yeah, right.
The Cambridge It's a former Wallaby.
Okay.
So Dave rowed at school at Church. He didn't row for years, and then he got back into rowing. And he's a 55-year-old bloke. He's about 16 or 16. He's a proper athlete. So,
That's John. That's a bit like us, isn't it? That we're talking about proper athletes in their mid-50s.
Yeah, I was just a bit concerned about that average age being so low. Otherwise, we could have a crack at it, Guy.
Yeah,
well,
I think there's other concerns than the age too.
Yeah,
maybe
still up.
The fact we didn't go.
Well, we didn't even cover off the lightweight side of it, did we, earlier, John? But that's all right. You'll be pleased to know, Alistair, that John agrees with you on the Cambridge calls. He's our resident guru on the event over here, and he's picked Cambridge on the men and the women, and so that's encouraging.
We've got our fingers crossed, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Some great racing, and the nice bit about this is once the racing's done, they are good people. We almost say that the person who has the closest experience to you is not the other people in your club in a different crew. It's the person you're racing against, because they've gone through the same selection. They've been successful or unsuccessful. They've had all the same bit. They've been the important ones or the less important ones. We share so much with them, and they're good people.
You've had the same journey basically, and you can appreciate all that's gone in regardless of outcome.
Yeah, and one of the Oxford guys, a good friend of mine, said, "I'm just going to hate you and wish you were dead while you're racing." But for the rest of it, that's when it stops, and that's the way it should be. You want to push them down. You want to drag them in the dirt when you're racing. You want to beat them, but when you're off the water, that's done, and you respect who they are and what they've done.
Look, that's spot on. Now, Alistair, I could see you acknowledging someone in the background there, so I'm guessing you probably have to shoot off.
Sorry to arrive late in the way.
No. That absolutely. We were just ecstatic to have you join us and get someone who knows a great deal more about it than we know. I'll just say, best of luck to Cambridge. I was going to put the Oxford cap on tonight that was floating around the house, not because I've ever had one, but my son got given one. But I've changed teams. I'm definitely Team Cambridge now.
Good man.
Yeah.
So, thanks very much, and thanks for making the time. And obviously, if anyone's interested in the boat race and come to Cambridge and rowing, come and talk to us or talk to Sean and Alan at Oxford as well. They're good people.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much again, Alistair, and we'll let you get back to it.
Thanks very much. Have a great day, and catch you
Thanks,
later.
Alan.
Thanks, mate.
Good luck.
Well, thanks, Rob, for putting us on to Alistair. That was great. It's good to get some insight from someone that's not just been there, done it, so to speak, but is on the inside of it as we speak.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We had our 40-year reunion last night. Monday night.
I was going to say, Rob, if it was last night, you're looking in awfully good form for having a 40-year reunion. I don't think I'd be fronting up so well.
84 in the first and second 8-1, but I've caught up with David Polframan, who a lot of people might know. David rates Alistair highly and says some wonderful things about him. So, it's just nice to have that connection, and the rowing network is amazing, but to have someone like Alistair jump on board and be part of this nice thing. Yeah.
Well, that's right. Well, when you gave me his email and I first reached out, I thought, I'll just softly. And he's, mate, that'll be great. I'll be on. I'm like, what? Come on, we're just doing this sort of thing. And, I think, he was saying it himself amongst the community of the two crews afterwards, or the universities afterwards, that, because you do. We know it even just from our fluffing around on the side of the banks as masters. You don't have any dislike for anyone at all. It's all part of the fun. You want to beat them. God, you do. You want to beat them, but you more importantly want to have a beer with them afterwards.
It's the experience in the journey which makes the sport so special.
Look, absolutely, and the people within it that really, and I'm certainly learning that over the last. I suppose I got sort of more heavily back involved in the last sort of 6 or 7 years, and I've met some great people, and by doing this, I'm meeting some really good people too, and it's absolutely fantastic. It really is. All a bit of fun. Yeah. Well, look, we should probably wind it up. It's getting a bit late. I've got to get my beauty sleep and all those sort of things, and get out of this fancy suit until next time. Well, I think the next show will, of course, be the Royal Henley. Now, John, obviously, John will be a starter on that one. The question for you, though, John, is will you be zooming in from over on the banks of the Royal Henley, or will you be stuck over in Australia this time?
In 2024, I'll be in Australia.
Well, at least you'll be on a sort of normal time frame. And Rob, we've already spoken about the Henley preview show in a few weeks' time.
Yeah.
But we'll look forward to that.
Is it a different dress code, Guy?
Look, I think I do dress down occasionally, and this is one of those times. I was going to, because of the nature of this event, if I had a morning suit, I would have put that on and just been a bit more classy about it. But I don't anymore. I don't.
I was thinking more your blazer for Henley.
Oh. Touche.
Well, much as history at Henley, maybe bring out the old school blazer for school kids, mate.
Yep, good call. Well done. There it is. Dress code, all sorted. I'm glad you brought that one up. Why didn't I think of that?
It has had some success at Henley, of course, but we digress to another regatta.
Yes, of course. Well, look, let's wind it up. It's getting late. It's nearly 9:30. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. It has been a lot of fun. It has been very informing. I've certainly learnt a lot. Thank you, John, for all of your wisdom and research, giving us that information. Certainly made it good. 300,000. I'm still blown away by that number. I'll be watching that stat closer than anything else. I suppose it's not like at the MCG at 3/4 time where they flash it up and but we'll just go with what the media says. Rob, thanks again for jumping on and joining us and being involved. It's fantastic. I love our chats too, and your motivation for rowing in general and all things about the sport. And no one better than yourself who's across all areas of it, really, in your experience.
Fixing boats, the thing I love about what I do is the relationships I create with customers, but I just love the sport. I have all my life, and it's just great to still be involved and enjoy what I do. So, but I really appreciate it.
And that's why we got along, is because I bought you some business earlier on in the
yes.
with our new boat on its first outing straight into the bank. But that happens to all of us.
It does, mate. That's what we're here to
exactly.
Yeah, terrific.
Anyway, well, look, thanks everyone for tuning in, and I no doubt there'll be more people watching this at a later date. And thank you very much. Hopefully, everyone got something out of it. The actual race itself, the Gemini boat race, very early on Sunday morning or late Saturday night, depending what your weekend plans are over Easter. But it kicks off at 1:46 a.m. Sunday time. There are plenty of links online to watch it. There is multiple races there. There is the reserves, there's the women's, there's the men's, should be really exciting. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you all next time. Thanks, John. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, John. Thanks.
Thanks, Guy. Thanks, Rob.
See you, everyone.